Okay, we begin. Greetings to everybody. I am Robin Schwartz. I am the Program and Grant Director of the Community Arts Partnership of Tompkins County, and the Art Trail is one of our programs. But first, some housekeeping. If all the visitors can stay on mute, that would be great. And I am monitoring the chat. So if you have any questions, just put them in the chat. If you have any comments that you want to share about the presentation you're seeing from artists, please write that in the chat. That's how we're going to be doing our communicating. The bathrooms are down the hall. And tonight, I always say that. That's what I mean, you guys. Like usually everyone's on mute. So when I say that, I can't hear if anyone laughs. Um, Tonight's artist will each talk for about 7 minutes. And then after all the artists talk, stick around, we'll do a Q&A. You can write your questions in the chat that you may have for any of the artists anytime. I will keep track of them, or you can wait until later when I ask if anyone has any questions. So the art trail. Sorry about that dingy noise. That's my computer. The art trail is a program of the Community Arts Partnership. And the Community Arts Partnership is basically the Tompkins County Arts Council. There's our mission on the screen. We run the Ithaca Artists Market in August. We run a Spring Rights Literary Festival in May. We have a Capapalooza art sale, which is basically a fundraiser where we don't ask artists to donate art, but we ask community members to donate art that's been in their attics and basements and was inherited, and their aunt Agnes took a watercolor class in 1960 and they don't know what to do with it. That's the kind of stuff we collect, and then we sell it. Last year, we made $14,000 and sold over 600 pieces of art. That's all on our website. Oh, Andrew, if you could put our website link in the chat. That's the artspartner.org one. We also have networking events. The next one is October 24th in our CAP Art Space. Those are fun. It's just meeting other artists and eating cake. And we have a professional development workshop series. We've done one already and we taped it. And then the next one is a marketing for artists workshop on November 21st. Everything we do is free. We also have grant programs. In 2024, we distributed almost $600,000 to local artists, and that number is way up over 7 million since we started over 30 years ago. Money goes to local artists, arts organizations, and not-for-profits for public programs, school residencies, and artist community projects. You will be on our mailing list unless you tell me that you don't want to be. And tonight's program is all about the art trail. The frick is that noise? The open studio weekends were last weekend and this weekend. There are about 30 artists who are open this weekend, the 19th and the 20th, from 11 to 5. Some of them are on the call today. But if you want to learn about who is open, I can actually send all of you who are on this call the PDF list tonight after we're done. It's also on arttrail.com. There's also a group exhibit up at the CAP Art Space. All the information about this is on arttrail.com. And this is just a screenshot of arttrail.com. There's a list of artists of who is open, and there's a PDF there. There's events and registration. You must have been to this page, I think, because this is where the Zoom registrations were. There's another Zoom event tomorrow night, so if you're fun tonight, come to that one. We have Google Maps now. I feel very modern about that. And this is what an artist portfolio page looks like. Every artist has a page, so the links that Andrew, oh, I didn't introduce Andrew. Andrew is someone who is helping us tonight. Thank you, Andrew. Andrew is going to put the art trail page link to the artists who are speaking in the chat. So you can check that out. Their contact information is there. And I just wanted to thank all of our Art Trail business and media sponsors. So now we begin. The first artist that is up is Brenna. And Brenna has a studio on Snyder Heights in Ellis Hollow, which is east of Ithaca, it's east of Cornell. And Brenna is a landscape painter and calligrapher. She is open this weekend and she has a huge, enormous, really cool studio. So take it away, Brenna.
You, Robin. Yes, I'm Brenna O'Toole. As Robin said, I'm a pastel painter and calligrapher. I studied art in college, and although I was introduced to soft pastels during that time, my primary focus had been on watercolors. Then a couple years after college, I happened to pull out a set of soft pastels, and as soon as I made my first stroke with them on a mid-toned sanded piece of paper, I just fell head over heels in love with the medium. I can be an impatient person at times. In college, I chose watercolors over oils because I couldn't stand how long it took for oils to dry. And now, here's a medium that has no drying time whatsoever. It's amazing. This pastel painting that you're looking at now, Three Sisters 2, was inspired by my honeymoon. My husband and I traveled to Ireland, and we were smitten with the breathtaking landscapes of the Dingle Peninsula. We hiked along a grassy bluff, and in between bursts of rain, the sky cleared and the sun shone on the sea in the distance. It was a magical day, and I had to paint it, not just once, but twice. This is Three Sisters 2. I actually painted a similar scene several years before I worked on this piece. Next slide, please.
The delay is not me not hearing you. The delay is my computer not responding.
Okay. I'll wait until it's on the screen.
I have to figure this out because obviously this can't keep happening. All right, I'm just
Robin,
going.
just checking that you hit record.
Yeah, I did. Thank you did I?
Yes, yes.
You did. Thank you, Andrew. And so what I'm going to do what's happening is that when I make the screen full view, I can't see anything else except you guys. So now I'm going to do it this way. So here is the next slide.
I may be a little bit longer than 7 minutes because of the delay. I apologize.
Yeah, that's fine.
This next painting, Parched, is from another vacation, this time to drought-stricken California. I don't know exactly where this dry stream bed and stand of trees is. It's somewhere along I-5 heading north. I toned the surface of the paper orange and then painted on top of that color, deliberately allowing the orange to show through the texture of the paper in order to emphasize the heat and the lack of moisture. Next slide, please. This painting, Distant Shower, is closer to home. This is a view of the Hudson River looking out toward the Catskills. I was out for a hike, and I was lucky enough to see this rain shower in the distance during a dramatic autumn afternoon. The support I used for this painting is velour board, which creates a very soft, almost ethereal look to the surface. It's very different from most of the surfaces I work with, but it's really lovely to paint on. Next slide, please. This next painting, Evening Light 2, I'm often enamored of the light in the late afternoon, and I was awestruck by the red light on the hills somewhere near Owego. We were driving around, and it just struck me in the moment. The tips of the bare deciduous trees were deep magenta, and I tried to create some interesting movement in the light and shadow on the pine tree. Next slide, please. This is the last pastel painting you'll see before I move on to a handful of calligraphy pieces. This painting, Sunset Pillar, is the closest to home yet. It was inspired by my daily walk. One day, as I was walking back up Dodge Road toward home, the sky just erupted with color and a pillar of light rose upward. The intense colors and the reflections on the snow begged me to paint them, and so I did. Next slide, please.
I'm going to ask you quickly, what is a velour board?
Velour board is a soft board that I paint on. It's like a piece of paper that's a little stiffer than paper, and it has a surface that feels like velour, so it's a very soft surface.
Cool.
All right, and now we move on to calligraphy. Calligraphy is the art of beautiful letters. In Western calligraphy, letters typically have a variation between thicks and thins that is aesthetically pleasing to look at. And there's a wide range of scripts and styles out there. With a broad edge pen, which is what I used for this piece that you're looking at right now, the thicks and thins are formed by holding the flat edge of a chisel-shaped nib at a constant angle. With a pointed pen, the thicks and thins are formed by applying and releasing pressure. I began my journey in calligraphy a decade ago now. I stumbled into a rabbit hole on the internet and never looked back. And although I started self-taught, at this point I've taken many classes over the years, both in person and online, and I've also had the good fortune to attend a couple of the international calligraphy conferences, which are always an incredible experience. It's a joy to be in the same room as hundreds of other nerdy people from all over the world who are devoted to preserving and expanding this art of beautiful letters. One of my instructors suggested that I should start teaching, so I have done that. I actually do teach calligraphy classes out of my studio here in Ellis Hollow. If you're interested, please do reach out. I really love sharing knowledge of this art form. So this calligraphy piece, Words Are Wings, is inspired by the words of the amazing late Ursula K. Le Guin. Her work has had a profound impact on my life. For this piece, I used a simple script, Foundational Hand, which is based on the English Caroline minuscule script found in the Ramsey Psalter, written in the late 900s. I painted the monarch butterfly with gouache and the flower with watercolor. Next slide, please. Here you see a complex vows piece that I did a couple years ago. It's always an honor to work on a vows commission for a client, and an even greater honor to do it for a friend. In this case, I participated in their ceremony and spent time camping with them afterward. The Four Seasons paintings are based on a little waterfall that was a 5-minute walk from our campsite. The center of the piece is an interpretation of the Tree of Life with gold leaf on the leaves and on the circle. Most of the text is in Carolingian, which is based on the Moutier Grandval Bible that was written in the 800s. The words in the outer ring are in italic. I wrote this text with gemstone watercolors. The red pigment is derived from garnet and the green from green apatite. Next slide, please. And this final piece is the most recent vows piece that I've completed. This is a very different script style, as you can see. This is a pointed pen script. That strange-looking oblique pen in the photo to the right is what I used to write letters. When I apply pressure to that sharp pointed nib, the tines spread apart and the stroke thickens. When I release pressure, the stroke becomes a thin hairline. For calligraphy pieces, I always try to do the writing first. Once the layout is all figured out, doing the actual writing doesn't take all that long, but the other design elements take a very long time indeed. It's most likely to make an unrecoverable mistake in the writing, so it's always best to get that done first. There were a lot of design elements that went into this piece: the monogram at the top, the ceremonial black and tan at the bottom, and all the complex border elements in between. It's actually still in my studio if you'd like to come out and see it in person this weekend. I know I said previously that I am sometimes impatient, but with calligraphy, I am somehow able to be very patient indeed. I'm happy that I can switch between the two modes of making art. They satisfy different needs, both for me and for others. And that brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you all for listening. Robin, back to you.
Thank you. So were you doing calligraphy demos during your open studio? Do I remember that? Or was that last year?
I am doing them on occasion, yes. I'm not
Okay.
sitting there constantly, but yes,
Right,
I sit and work on things during open studio. Yep.
Thank you, Brenna.
Yes, of course.
Thank you so much. Next is June Szabo. And June's studio is in Trumansburg, and she works with fiber, wire, and wood. Take yourself off mute. And June is not open this weekend. She was open last weekend. So June's first slide is, take it away.
I have been having conversations with the landscape for as long as I can remember. I have watched and listened to the world from my fort in a hayfield, on the limb of a tree, at a lakeshore, and on a rock in a stream. Though no words are spoken, I see, hear, smell, touch, and taste the wisdom of the earth. Its views are broad and open on the lakeshores and the hills. Did you hear my bell? Next slide.
No.
They are intimate and revealing in the gorges and the glens. Secrets are tossed or bubble to the surface with stone, sand, or salt, and whispered by wind and water. On a day I am looking for grace, I go outside, hike to a hilltop, wander a ridge, or stumble through a ravine. I gently place my hand on a clump of inviting moss, admire a fungus that has emerged from the trunk of the tree, and breathe in the forest air. Always fascinated by what I find and sometimes puzzled, I wonder, what is the world telling me? How does the landscape embrace and adjust to every situation? Next slide. When I don't find the answer, I burrow into my mountain of books, researched and written by authors who study many subjects: geology, sociology, philosophy, biology. They help me translate the wordless wisdom offered by the earth. Next slide. When I can contemplate no more the power of a place and the questions in my mind, they spill out into my hands. I go to my studio and produce a working drawing inspired by my expeditions into the landscape and topographical maps. Next slide. Layers of lumber give my thoughts depth and dimension. I build a wood sculpture by cutting and stacking hundreds of pieces of wood. As the miniature hills are joined together with glue and clamps, I also carve them. The sculpture I am building in this slide and the next one is called Letting Go, Headwaters of Hector Falls. It is a place, but for me, it was also a lesson learned from the landscape, and this is what I discovered. As the last glacier moved south, carving the Cayuga and Seneca troughs, it filled this east-west valley with a branch of ice. Two spurs extended from the main glacier in a perpendicular direction and crept along the portage escarpment. It is probable that the two east-west extensions of ice met here at the present-day drainage divide for the headwaters of Taganic and Hector Falls. Next slide. The soils left by the glacier in this valley suggest that the ice lingered here for a very long time. In our age, water pours from the surrounding hills into a swampy pond where it may sit for a while, but then it tumbles onward to build a point where the stream enters Seneca Lake. In the 1970s, men began to assist in the removal of the glacial deposits by digging out the gravelly loam to build bridges and roads. In the 1970s, men began to assist in the removal of the glacial deposits by digging out the gravelly loam to build bridges and roads. Sorry, just repeated that. In 1976, a family that lived on South Hill above this valley moved to the gravel pit below. They left the hilltop when a daughter drowned in a pond on their farm. Perhaps with time and distance, as her father dug the glacial deposits, the family transformed some of the grief that came with her loss. You can go to the next slide, Robin.
Am I in the right one? Because I think I got
Now
it.
you are.
Oh, good.
The dissolution of a glacier is done at both a slow and steady pace and by liberated torrents of gushing water. As this happens, the earth begins to rise and transform. The world will bring us glacial events and troublesome emotions like grief, guilt, and anger. I recognize my own struggle with grief in this family's story. I was the swamp and the pit. All my grief could not be resolved in a watershed moment. In addition to recognition, I needed compassion and patience to let go, rise, and recover. Next slide. To create my metal sculptures, I wrap a core of wire into coils and join them with a basket stitch. I warp my loom with copper wire and weave panels that are folded, pleated, and bent into three-dimensional forms. Weaving creates thousands of connections and intersections, bonds that are sometimes unseen, but essential for life. Next slide. This piece is called Weaving Water. It is a comparison between the movement of water to the unfolding of my life. I am wound about and woven into the living processes of the earth. With this work, I am making objects to honor our natural world and weaving together the person I am with who I will become. Each work of art is an opportunity to reflect on my life and the world around me. Next slide. When I started to explore and listen to the vast and varied web of life that encircles us, I began to find my own. The path I have stumbled upon is worn with curiosity, questions, and a desire to never assume or trample. I prefer to observe, to live with care and wonder, to be of the earth and look toward the stars. I've just read to you some excerpts from my book, Conversations with Land and Water. If you would like to know more, my book can be purchased online at handwork.com, in person at Handwork, or One Green Horse and Transfer.
Are they handwork.com or handwork.coop?
Oh, sorry, .coop.
Yeah. All righty. Thank you so much, June. And there's some questions for you, but I'm gonna do them at the end. Next up is Barbara. There you are.
Okay.
Barbara is open this weekend, and she is a fiber artist and a painter.
Thanks, Robin. Thank you to the Community Arts Partnership for making the Art Trail possible. And thanks to everybody who's listening and making time to learn about local art and local artists. I appreciate that. So as Robin said, I'm both a fabric artist who makes abstract art quilts with fabrics that I dye myself, and a painter who creates abstract acrylic paintings. And in the next few minutes, I want to show you samples of my work and talk about some of the characteristics that I think my work has in common across the different mediums that I use. Very briefly, some background. I started out many years ago as a traditional quilter, using well-known patterns, but after a few years, I realized I didn't want to use somebody else's designs. I wanted to create my own, and I cared less about the functionality of them as much as I did being able to have them displayed on walls in the same way that you would display a painting. Since those days, my work has evolved and changed many times, but the one change that I want to mention tonight is that starting about 6 years ago, I moved away from using commercial fabrics and I began to design my own fabrics. And that's what this slide is right here. So this is an example of some of the fabrics that I make. They represent a variety of painting, printing, and immersion techniques, all using fiber reactive dyes. And so I sort of think of sharing this slide in the same way that I would show a slide of a group of paints that I use to create paintings. So I then take fabrics like this and cut them up to make art quilts. Next slide. For the most part, I tend to create quilts in one of 3 different styles. And these are 2 examples of the first style, and that is improvisational quilts, where basically I have no idea what the design is going to look like until I'm done. And you can see that in these 2 images. It's a lot of cutting and resewing and moving around and inserting, etc. The second style on the next slide is more planned. Next slide, Robin.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you. And this is based on photos that I take mostly in places that inspire me. And here are 2 examples. The piece on the left was based on a display of plants that I saw in LA. It looked very jungle-like, but it was actually very controlled. So I call this Take a Walk on the Mild Side. And the quilt on the right is part of a canyon series that I'm doing based on photos of a slot canyon that I took in northern Arizona. Next slide. This is 2 examples of the third style, which is a little less common than the other 2. And these tend to be much smaller, where I'm just stitching the fabrics together and doing some decorative stitching and embellishment, and then mounting those on wood panels that I paint. So they're very easy to display. So for the most part, even though I sometimes make work that doesn't fit one of these 3 styles, this is kind of a general overview of the kinds of quilts that I make. My journey into painting, unlike the quilt, started much later, and it wasn't until early 2020, shortly before lockdown actually, that I started to pursue it in earnest. And like my quilts, I think my work tends to fall into two general categories. Next slide. The first of the styles is just pure abstraction. I'm not trying to suggest any particular subject. I'm just having fun with using paints and other mark making tools and sometimes some collage elements to make paintings such as these. The second style on the next slide is still abstract, but it's suggestive of landscapes, whether they're rural, urban, or in many cases imaginary. The image on the left is suggestive of the Southwest, where I spend a lot of time. And the image on the right is inspired, by Ithaca with all of our amazing gorges and waterfalls. So regardless of whether I'm working with paint or with fabric, I've come to realize that there are at least 4 characteristics that I think my work shares across mediums. And I wanted to just talk about that for a minute. The first of these is a lot of saturated color. Next slide. You can see that here. These are, each image is a section from a larger piece of work that I've done, both paintings and quilts and some collage as well. It's very hard to be depressed when you're surrounded by such bright, happy colors. It's kind of therapy, And I should mention that each one of these images is a note card that I have. I have almost 100 different note cards that I sell based on the larger works that I make. So color is the first characteristic. Next slide. The second, I've kind of alluded to it already, and that's the influence of place. You can see that here on the left. This is a different, looks kind of like the other canyon quilt I showed, but this one is different. Again, a quilt based on a slot canyon in northern Arizona, and the painting on the right was based on hiking in Buttermilk Gorge. Next slide. This is a quilt on the left and a painting on the right, which both reveal the third characteristic, and that is that my work is abstract. It's typically non-representational, and like I said before, often improvisational. And again, I often start out, almost always, with no idea of where I'm going to end up. So it's usually exciting, sometimes frustrating, but it's a lot of fun. And then the last characteristic that I want to talk about is that my work is layered. And so here are 3 images. The image on the left is a painting. I put lots of layers of paint down, and you can see how subsequent layers both conceal and reveal the layers below. I really like this kind of work because it results in a lot of texture and nuance, which I find very appealing. The middle image is an older quilt of mine. A quilt by definition is layered, right? You've got your quilt top, which is the design that you see. There's a fabric on the back, and then in between is a layer of batting, which those 3 layers are then held together with decorative stitching that ideally enhances the design of the piece to top. This particular piece, the center image, is a quilt sandwich, the 3 layers I just discussed, placed upon another quilt sandwich. So there's actually 6 layers in this piece. And then some little doodads on top. I guess you could kind of count that as a layer. And oftentimes, even the fabrics that I use in the quilts are layered. So the image on the right is one of my hand-dyed fabrics made with different layers of these sort of translucent dyes. So overall, I love talking about what I do and how I make it. I love to share my work with others. If my work resonates with you, I hope you will stop by and come out this weekend. If for some reason you can't make it, I want to point out that I do have a solo show this month downtown in the Hilton Garden Inn. It's in that little hallway. You enter through the lobby and the show is there on the right. A note about my website, the URL is Art Quilts by Barb. I had that URL before I started to paint, but my paintings are on there as well. And I'm also on Instagram and Facebook, so I hope you'll consider following me. So thank you everybody so much, and come out and see me on the trail.
Thank you so much, Barbara.
Yeah.
You guys are all so presenting so beautifully. I usually just wing it, which doesn't always work. The next person is Arthur. I'm looking for Arthur. I want to make sure, Arthur, that you have your screen on. Jim. Oh, there you are. You're right there. You're right in front of me.
Hi,
There's Arthur.
can you hear me?
Yep, we can.
All right. So, my name is Arthur, and I'm a sculpture idiom painter, a style I learned from my dad, creating a three-dimensional image on a two-dimensional surface. This painting is called "The Damsels in Distress," ladies at a gathering looking for their potential suitors. The neck designs is a cultural symbol of beauty where people have cuts in their necks, like folds of skin. The intertwined images is like a matriarch teaching the two younger people how to be and how to attract the right kind of people that they want. The usage of color is to create a festive moment and just vivid imagination to make you enjoy the image. If it's on your wall, kind of engulfs the whole area where it can fit with any kind of decor if you have it on your wall in your house somewhere. It's called Damsel in Distress. Next video, next picture.
I forgot to say that Arthur is open this weekend. He's in Founder's Way, which are apartments at on West Buffalo Street. And I believe you're set up in the community room, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And it's your first year on the art trail. So think about visiting Arthur this weekend. Okay,
Okay.
back to you.
Okay, so this is called Fish and Fungus. I always had a fascination as a child in Ghana watching fossils of different kinds of mushrooms grow on trees and how it attracted different kinds of animals and habitat to the area because of those mushrooms. I also like mushrooms in my food, and I used to normally get this meal where it was baked fish with mushrooms as a casserole dish kind of. So with my love of blue, the color and water, I try to incorporate all that into this and make them as psychedelic mushrooms as possible. And to make them colorful and vivid, just do the same thing as capture the person's attention when they have to look at it because there's so much detail as to what it is that I'm trying to portray, the overlapping ideologies and just a whole mix of colors makes it so powerful to make somebody have to glare at it for a while to take in what they see. Next picture. This is called Worship of a Deity. Growing up in Ghana, we used to have certain festivals where people believed in deities, and the forefront image is the deity that these people are kind of worshiping. He's in a higher elevated position, like in a palanquin of sorts. So they're looking up from the bottom, and the red symbolizes the intensity of the occasion and the reason that they're so mesmerized by this deity that they do worship, because he does make things happen in their minds. So the red creates that realness and that I don't know what word to use, but like just the intensity of what the occasion is all about. Next picture. So this is an interesting painting because it's called Two Heads Are Better Than One. And in my language, it's pump. That means same thing, two heads better than one. One head can't do it alone. And you know, women are always instrumental in how successful men are, in my opinion. And they take the background and give you the glory. I like afros. I have a salt and pepper beard, and my home health aide has vertigo, and it's like patterns to me. When I look at her, I see patterns. So she's very interesting looking. So while I was painting this, I incorporated her in the back because she's a person who takes care of me since I'm disabled, and she takes care of me from head to toe, and we spend a lot of time together. So we've grown a kinship. So when I was painting it, I had her in mind. So that's why you see the white color and the gold color to give that impression of the vertigo being such a positive thing in my eyes. All right, next one. Okay, so this is called The Brick House. It's basically a painting of trying to find what colors can all exist on one canvas be very powerful, at the same time, be very subtle. The people you see in the imagery are the people at a club and are hanging out, dancing, and somebody asks to take a picture, and the backdrop is the brick house. If you know the song with the Commodores, She's a Brick House, it's about a curvy woman, and it's an attractive place. So I incorporated those things into this imagery and created some illusions of where you can see an afro of the person in the middle that's really big. I don't know if you can see it or not, but there's a guy in the middle with an afro that goes all the way to the top of the painting, with other people inside and outside of it. So that's just the intensity. It really comes back to that for me all the time. The crispness of my designs to make sure that people see, and it's vivid when it's very decorative when they're placed on a wall. All right, next one, please. Now, this painting is called The Fishmongers, and it's more of the style of my dad, the sculpture idiom, because I actually took a mental picture of what he did when I was a kid, and this was one of them. I actually found a picture later, and basically people selling fish. My dad's work was very earth toned, but I added a little more color in my descriptions, and I put blue to create the presence of where these fish came from, and the garments to show how prominent these people are and how much they hold people's consumption as far as fish goes is concerned. They wear those hats to keep the sun out and to keep the flies from flying over the fish, because they have to sell their catch of the day. So I incorporated many fish in different places, and you have to kind of do a little bit of a looking around to see how many fish are in there. And that's what I like to do with my paintings, to capture your view or your attention for at least 1 or 2 or 3 minutes to take in what it is that you're looking at. All right, next one, please. This is actually a bit of a rendition of one of my dad's mask motif paintings. As a child, my dad worked for the Arts Council of Ghana, and he was a very cultural person. He loved to paint. He was a sculptor. He liked so he used to buy masks a lot, and he would put them in the house. So one day he decided to make a painting of those masks. And I was visiting my brother one day, and I took a picture of it, and it just reminded me of my dad's work. So I decided, since my work is almost so colorful all the time, I wanted to do like a few colors, a much less amount of colors, and try to create what my dad instilled in me. The unfortunate thing is he died when I was 12, so he would have loved to have seen my paintings. But if he's somewhere he can see, at least he knows that it got carried on, because I was named after him. But that's what this mask motif is about. Next one, please. For those, I'm sure most people know about the Maasai shepherds. They wear these red garments, and they come from a part in Kenya, I think it is. And this is their festive garments. And I was always fascinated by the way they used to use beads to create such vivid and yet so different and yet so similar garments, expression, and just using the cultural vivid type of color. I think I allude to color a lot because I think it brings color, it brings out a lot of things in people, and what, like the lady was saying earlier about her paintings about color. You can't be depressed because it's gonna make you feel festive all the time. I like the blues and the reds because they contrast pretty well with each other. And of course the earth tones for the different complexions of the people, and just the garments to make it as a nice, powerful piece when mounted. Next one, please.
That was the last one.
Oh, my bad. All right, so yeah, so I lost the use of my left hand when I had my brain tumor, ended up in a wheelchair, had to teach myself to paint with my right hand, and had to learn how to paint all over again. And it took me 2 to 3 years, and this is the result of the work that I put in for all that time. So feel free to come check me out, 320 West Buffalo Street in my rec room. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Everybody do that. And it's going to be nice out too.
Yeah.
I think. All right, next I'm looking for Cindy. Sorry it takes me so long to find people. It's because I'm sharing the screen. And there you are, Cindy. And Cindy does acrylic and mixed media paintings. And she is not open this weekend. But definitely please visit all of the Art Trail artists on arttrail.com. I think everyone is open by appointment anytime. Here we go.
Okay, thanks. I've had about a 30+ year career as an architect, interior architect for the most part. And about a year and a few months ago, I pivoted and I decided that I wanted to I wanted to do something really different that didn't have the constraints of walls and building codes and technology. And I really wanted to get into creating naturalistic, sort of immersive environments in an art form. So here's one painting called Morning Light, and it depicts a meadow of flowers. I would call it like abstract expression, expressive, illustrative, but it even has like a little bit of a cartoony style. And I really try to capture like the movement of the flowers and the flora rather than the realistic detail. So loose brushstrokes and blending of color. But the process is really about layering, and I layer from dark to light, and I have, you know, many, many, many layers that I eventually get to the aesthetic that I want. And like some of the other artists have talked about, the use of color, I do go really bold in order to try to get these, you know, darks and lights and try to get contrast in different areas of the painting. Next. So this is called orange poppies in meadow, and the idea of this is these poppies that are stretching up to almost like a homogeneous sky in this clear bright blue sky, almost as if you're lying in the ground and you're immersing yourself in the meadow. And that's my intention in all the paintings that you're going to see tonight. This is like the type of work I'm doing right now, is that there's this like infinite like this meadow goes on forever, and you're really in it. And so these upward reaching stems sort of suggest growth and vitality, energy and joy. And you can see that the blue back painting peeks through, so that you never lose a sense of what these layers are. You really get a sense of depth. Next, please.
I'm going to ask one of the questions I see. How large are these?
Okay, so the first, the Morning Light, that's 30 by 48, I believe. The one before, the orange pop, yeah, that one is 36 by 48. The next one that you're going to see is I believe it's 24 by 48, but I go as large as 60 inches, and I also do small ones that are 8 by 8. So you know, in general, and I'll tell you from now on what these sizes are. So now here I'm trying to get a little bit more abstract. So like, as I said, painting for me is like pretty new, like the past couple years. And although I've always done drawing and collage, but painting is new. And I really want to get to a more abstract place, but not as abstract maybe as Barb goes, but like I want to be able to the viewer to really see what they're looking, you know, that they're looking at something that is identifiable, but I want to use more color blocking and more abstract ways of getting this idea of wind and stem and breeze and sunlight, and actually, you know, reducing it down to like more blocks of color, I think. Next, please. This one is 20 by 20, and it's called Poppies at Sunset. And I kind of flipped the rule where like the background shows the warmth and the foreground shows the cooler tones down in the stem area. I wanted to give this impression of a sunset behind this infinite field of poppies. And then, you know, as you imagine the stems of these poppies, how they're in shadow and it's cooler down there. And you really get a sense that there are more flowers going back in, you know, to infinity. Next, please. This is one of my earlier paintings, one of the first ones. This is 36 by 48, called Reach for the Sun. And as you can see, the stems are on the right. They're reaching for the sun. And the idea that I'm trying to express here is this idea of movement and flowers and stems as they reach for that sunlight. But I don't want to lose sight of the depth and the darkness and the, you know, the shadow that's happening like underneath all of that tangle of flowers and life and everything that you are seeing from the top. Next, please. This is another one that I'm trying to explore, a more abstract rendition of florals in a meadow, in a field. As you can see, I'm kind of obsessed with poppies these days, but again, I do really try to show this idea of this warm background, and maybe there's a forest back there, but there's sunlight hitting it, and you can see the sunlight is hitting these flowers that are sort of in the background, and then these very abstracted sort of just shapes in the foreground that capture light, that capture the shape of the poppy, and it becomes more like a pattern. And again, another thing that I'm trying to get to is for the paintings to start to look almost like a tapestry. Next, please. This is another area that I'm exploring, is more of like a graphic sort of rendition of flora. And this was from a place at the botanical gardens at Cornell, and the idea that I could create sort of like a graphic design, almost like a textile perhaps, with just different pattern. But again, I'm very conscious of moving the eye around the painting, and of course, sunlight and shade. Next, please. This is another poppy painting. This was a garden around the block for me. And again, some of the other paintings that you saw were from that same garden, actually, but this is a different rendition of it on a different day, of a picture that I took. And just like, it was wild, it was buzzing with bees and butterflies and wind and life. And I just tried to capture the wildness that one sees, and this energy, this life force. And again, you are at the level, you are at the eye level, you are in the garden. And I know that I probably need to wrap up. So the next, please. This is just another sort of example where I go a little bit abstract more with the flowers up above, but you can see the pattern behind the sunflowers to suggest the movement and the depth in the sky, sort of showing through the negative, the positive. And finally, my last image is called Wheat Field. And this was just a simple wheat field that I walked by, and it was mostly wheat, and there were like a couple of pops of pink flowers and a couple of yellow, and again, like everything that I do, I really embellish and layer on till it doesn't even look like the photograph that I took after a while. And I start to use some pen. You could see some pen work in the detailing of the wheat in the foreground. So I'd like to get more using the pen and going more abstract as I continue to move forward. Thank you all for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. And you actually just answered one of the questions from someone was whether you took photographs or not. And you
Yeah.
ended up, you do.
Yeah.
And now I'm looking for Vivinne. There you are.
Oh,
There
hey.
you go.
Hello, all. I put a little timer on for myself. I am, yeah, really grateful and happy to be here. I just want to give a little background. So I have been doing art for many, many years, since I was a little girl, really, and went to Music and Art High School, which is in New York City, and also was in academia for some time. And after having a hard time in academia, I took about a 10-year break from making art. So I'm really grateful and happy to be back making art. And, you know, after such a long break. Okay, next slide. I just want to share with you why I paint clouds. We're going to look at, these are very tiny. They're maybe 8 by 10. They're all very tiny. And I feel like clouds, you know, might be considered something banal, like painting apples or something, or still life. It's like, oh, that's not very modern. But I am a Buddhist, and I find clouds incredibly fitting for many of the ideas in Buddhism, such as the simplicity of the color is what I like. I like that it's very calming. The blues and the whites, very minimalist color, is something that I'm going for. I believe this one is called Two Blues because as I made it, I realized that there were two distinct shades of blue that felt like were really happening in the sky to me. I did do them on plein air, so outside. Next slide, please. And yeah, this is called Pika Blue. And another thing that I love about clouds is it forces me to be spontaneous. Which is very Zen. I have to paint very quickly and in the moment to try to capture what's going on. And also being outside is part of the lifestyle that I want, is that, you know, closeness to nature and that mindfulness. So painting clouds serves me in that way, yes. And I meditate a lot. And so it's sort of a meditative process, but very, very in the moment. Next slide, please. And this is called Whisper. And I actually think it's prettier than in the slide. I think I didn't take a great photo, but it has a very soft quality to it. Something that someone said struck me about the universality of clouds. I hadn't really thought about that. And they're like, you know, wherever you go, there are clouds like around the world, you know, whether you're in Israel or you're in Papua New Guinea or you're in Maine, like we're all seeing the beauty. I really feel it's like beauty of the divine. I believe it's almost like God's art there for us to see that we overlook. So those are the reasons I specifically painted clouds for so, so long. Yeah, and as I said, all of these are quite tiny so that I can do them quickly. Next slide. And I believe this is actually my last slide. I had wanted to have a group one of all the different clouds, but I didn't get it in there in time. This is very different. And this is actually from an older series, but interestingly enough, it's coming back around. So to put it in a nutshell, it is about immigration, but not really. Coming from a personal space, I was born in Jamaica, and so I immigrated here to this country. And so just to, you know, take your time looking at it, and I'll just say a little bit. The big yellow shape is the island of Jamaica, which I don't expect that necessarily people will know. The little girl is me. That's a photograph. So this is a collage. And it is about my mother leaving, leaving Jamaica. And as common in the immigrant experience, she left me behind to make her way, you know, to earn money and support her family back in Jamaica. So she left me behind. And so that some of that erasure of the little girl and, you know, her almost of herself, right, by not having her mother there. And then some of the lines just represent like I thought of them as like the runway on an airplane. And then you can see the shape of America there. And that's also a photo of my mom, and she's got her arms wrapped around a child that she was taking care of. And so I don't, if you saw it in person, you might be able to see that. And so it's just really juxtaposing where I am in Jamaica and there, you know, her travels to the US, and Shiguan, that's Jamaican patois for it means she's gone, she's left, right? Shiguan. And the ribbons, just because at that time, some of you might be from my generation, little girls very much still wore like bows in their hair. And so I'd often have like 5 bows and 6 bows in my hair, as you can see in the photo. And so the bows just became, I don't know, something poignant, perhaps about the idea of gift, or they felt like they could float away as well, right? Like ribbon can just like fly in the air. So yeah, and so this piece is charcoal, acrylic paint, and photography all collaged. And so I got a grant to partially support my travels where I'll be investigating more about immigration, specifically in Europe, and people from the African diaspora and sort of the historical movement of people. So I'm really grateful for that. So even though this is an older piece, I'm coming back around to this topic. So thank you so much for giving me a chance to share my work, and
Yeah.
thank
And she
you.
got a community arts partnership.
Yes, from from you guys.
Strategic opportunity stipend.
Strategic opportunity.
Right.
In part, it's paying in part. A lot of it is going to be out
In
of pocket,
part.
but I'm
So
very grateful for it.
I want to remind the artists to look in the chat because lots of
Mhm.
people are saying really nice things about you guys. So you'll
Yes,
read
thank
that.
you.
And also I want to, before we go to Jim Burlitch, I want to just tell everyone that's on the call that I'll be emailing you not only the link to who is open this weekend, but also I forgot that the group exhibit at the Cap Art Space also exists online in 3D. So I'll send you those links as well. Okay, next up is Jim Burlitch. Jim. There he is. Hi, Jim. So Jim is a fine art photographer and he is open this weekend. Huge, amazing studio. Jim is on Ellis Hollow Road. And take it away, Jim.
Thank you, Robin. And thank you all for tuning into this event. I want to first invite you to my studio this weekend to see some of the pictures I'm going to talk about in sort of real life form. The first one of these is a prize-winning photo that I found the image for on a hike in Bryce Canyon. And this was the afternoon, late afternoon, and I realized when I got to this scene, I didn't have much time left. So I quickly set up and took this picture. It has the 3 qualities that I think are good or essential for a really fine photograph. First is an interesting subject, and that's the hoodoos certainly fill that category here. The second would be good to exceptional lighting, and surely in this one, exceptional is the word, which brings out the 3-dimensional aspect of the various features, so from front to back. And the third is it's a engaging composition, one that lets the viewer spend time looking around various aspects of the photograph. In this case, for example, how a pine tree is growing in a really small slot of a rock, and where, in fact, from the title, Peekaboo Trail, Peekaboo Trail is, it's near the top of that very pine tree. I have this in a frame print, about 28 by 32. It's impressive. Next slide, please. This photo was taken from a scene we came upon while hiking much closer to home in Upper Treeman State Park, in a pool under a stone bridge. Waves were rippling the water and turning the basswood tree and its big leaves into abstract forms. And I think this is so cool because it has a gradation of light from top to bottom and just an amazing collection of different forms. Next slide, please. Another hike further away this time on the island of Kauai, Hawaii. We came upon a grove of 30 or so trees. These are painted eucalyptus trees. They're not native to Hawaii, but I was really, really enthralled with the coloration. That's why they're called painted eucalyptus. And how was I going to portray that? So I thought in this case, we use the mantra, less is more. So I got really, really close to one of these trees and took this photograph, which illustrates the progression of growth of the bark, typical of eucalyptus, but without, the typical eucalyptus doesn't have this color. Here it turns young, when it's young, it's green, getting darker green and greenish blue and then orange and finally burgundy and curling up and falling off. I call this peeling painted eucalyptus. I have it in about an 8 by 32 inch frame print, printed on canvas at my studio. Next, please. This image took more than just hiking around. It was the site up near in North Lansing was brought to my attention by my optometrist, Dr. Alex Wood, who has a home near there. And so he said, you might want to check this out. And so Kathy and I took off the next morning to the site and were amazed by what we saw. This photograph shows about 2/3 of the actual print that's in my studio, which is about 5 feet long. In order to see all the flowers, I had to get up on the trunk of my car, set up the tripod and the camera there, and pan from one side to the other, taking about 4 images and later putting them in together in Photoshop. Next, please. Now, departing a bit, maybe quite a bit, from my nature interests, I began playing around with something known roughly as light painting. Here, lights are used as sort of the subject. And these lights are on our Christmas tree a few years ago. I turned off all the other lights in the room, so all one saw was the lights, and I opened the lens of the shutter of the camera and pointed it at the tree and slowly walked all the way around the tree with the lens open. And I did 2 or 3 of these and picked this one out because it had a sense to me of what it might be like to be a sort of in a nightmare where you are kind of trapped in the middle with all kinds of things going on around you and there's no apparent way out. So I called it Nightmare. I have that on canvas, about 26 by 30 inches. Next, please. This image was years in the making, literally. Many years ago, I was in our bathroom upstairs and noticed that when I opened the doors to the medicine cabinet that had mirrors on them and brought them together in front of the third mirror and peeked inside the crack where those two mirrors came together, I saw this most amazing scene of frames of mirrors and more mirrors and on and on and on it went. And I thought to myself, this ought to make a really neat photo one of these days if I can figure out just how to do it. So when I got a call recently that the State of the Art was holding its annual photo show, I thought, well, all right, I got to do something. And then it hit me. The mirrors in this picture this image I was seeing looking at that crack was related to a saying that I remembered called smoke and mirrors. It's kind of a saying you might use when you've been tricked in some way. So that was the theme. And then it was only a question of finding the subject. So I went to the store and got 2 apples, put them in front of those, in between those 2 front mirrors. And then with smoke coming from 2 wooden matches underneath them, lighted by my wife, Kathy, I took the picture that you see, and called it Bumper Crop from Smoke and Mirrors. And I was happy to know that this got an award in this photo contest. And I'd be happy to show it to you if you want to see it in my studio. Thanks so much again for listening and watching.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you. Next up is Dianne. Finding Dianne. There she is. There is Dianne. Go for it.
Thank you so much, Robin. I am delighted to participate with so many fabulous artists. I've had a wonderful time watching. I'll start. This is my background is from an MFA to a PhD. I think I've always been an artist and I love teaching. So the two of them combined together to make my life in art. My art is mostly about experiences. This was a painting that was done very quickly, although it's 4 feet by 5 feet, it's very large. The title is Spring. I was overwhelmed last spring with the sense of light changes for me in season. And I was just blown away one afternoon by the colors and just had to make this painting. It was very quick and very large, and I just enjoyed it so much. Next painting. This was a commission. It's a bit smaller. All of my work is in oil on canvas, the work that I'm showing. Let me see if I can start my video. Here we go. This is titled Mother and Daughter. I have a dear friend who lost her mother early, and she asked if I would make a painting in honor of her mother. And I learned representational art and then had to teach myself abstraction, which I find holds more for me. It's a sense of a mother and a daughter holding each other. There's two figures in the middle. When I showed the work to the woman who commissioned me, she began crying and said, "That's my mother and that's me, and she's holding me." It was a very moving experience for both of us. I still have it while she gets her life in a place where she can take it and have it with her. Like I said, my art is it moved from representational to abstraction to hold more of an experience, and this is the experience of losing her mother. Next, please. This was a painting that started out, I work in a studio in my basement, started out rather quickly, and I'm dealing with some medical issues involving my bones. And as we get older, time is precious. So maybe even more precious than when we're young and we think we're going to live forever. My birthday is tomorrow, and I realize that I have 20 precious years left probably. So I really want to make a lot of art. So I'm going to continue. This painting is called Good Bones. I started making this painting and then got sidetracked and left the studio and came back the next morning ready to work on it some more. And it said, the painting spoke to me and said, "Well, you liked me yesterday. Don't you like me anymore?" And I kind of sat back and basically it was telling me, "I'm done. You liked it before. Why are you going to throw more paint on me?" So I thought, well, I'm just going to let this be for a while. And each time I went to finish it, I really realized that it was done, that lots of times I will paint a structure and then layer more into it. And this structure was so beautiful, it didn't want anything more layered into it. So it's finished. It's called Good Bones. Next, please. So I finished a PhD in educational leadership, which probably one of the hardest things I've ever done. And when I didn't know what to do with writing the dissertation or doing research, I would make a non-representational painting, and it would somehow during the process or after the process or living with the painting, I would get some information. When we create something new, something like a painting, something new information, something new is born, is created. So a lot of the work in the dissertation was brand new, and I needed information about how to go about the business of writing this huge thing. And this is the painting that I finished with. And I learned that you can, my committee would let me work forever to really continue to do research and continue to edit and rewrite and do more until I finally said, "I'm finished. This is done. If you want more, you'll have to do it." So this is called the finish, because it's when I finally took a stand and said, "I'm all done with this dissertation." I think it says everything I wanted to say. Please let me be not done, and please let me defend what I've done. And so this is a painting I'm going to keep. It's not for sale. It marks my voice in academia saying, "I'm finished." Next, please. Oh, my grandson came to me with a dream that he had and wanted me to paint a painting for him. He tried to explain that he was, I think it was a lucid dream. I think he was astral flying or whatever. He was, he said it had angels in it. So I painted this painting and I said, "Is this it, darling?" And he said, not a chance, not even close, Nana. So then I realized it was about my ideas and not his. So I had to listen very carefully to him to make a painting that was about his experience, not mine. I call this astral because for me, it's about moving through a dream state into another reality. And so, again, about color and again, about experience. And this took a long time. There's many layers in this. Oil takes a long time to dry. So some of the fuzziness is not waiting long enough for it to dry. Next one, please. Oh, wait a minute. This is one more art-based research painting. When I was first learning to write, I would write and I would meander all over the place and I would try to figure out what it was I was saying. I was also teaching public school at the same time. And for those of us that are teachers, it takes just about everything we have to get through a day. And I would come home and I would turn on the computer and I would say, "What was that thought I had yesterday when I was writing?" So I made this painting to try to stay focused on how to write. And for me, if I look at this painting, it starts at the top and it sort of winds around like a paragraph might, and then you get to a point where you make a point. And that was the whole dissertation. What was the point I was making? The title of the dissertation is Art Teachers' Perceptions of the Relationship Between One's Own Personal Creative Work and the Work of Teaching, and how the research was how they inform each other. And so staying focused was really important for me, and doing art-based research, as it were, for my own learning helped me write the dissertation. This I call total because it keeps my total focus on what I'm writing in a paragraph. Last picture. This one is a large painting too. Its title is Heart to Heart. Listening and layering and color and shape all really relate an experience of living in this world where we're relating to another human being. And my heart to another person's heart feels like fluffy, colorful connection. And so that's what's underneath this painting is my sweetheart and how we touch each other. And when I look at the painting, I can feel that connection. So there's, again, the experience that I paint is potent for me. I made a living doing watercolor portraiture when I lived in Hawaii, and they're very realistic. Watercolor portraiture took a skill that I developed in representational art. But to teach me myself to do abstract art was more attention to experience, which is what I love in art making. I hope to do a lot more of it. Thank you so much, Art Trail, for being there.
Thank you so much. What an amazing evening this was. Let me just remove your spotlight.
Truly amazing.
And I'm going to stop the share. And stick around, we can ask some questions. I'm actually going to stop the recording. So we had some